This video introduces use case 7 of the lolipop-iot project. It demonstrates the complete setup of the silo monitoring experiment and shows how the system captures thermal, humidity, and gas concentration changes inside a controlled silo environment. The experiment uses a controlled in vitro emulation of an industrial grain silo. A glass pot emulates the silo body, filled with rice to reproduce the thermal and moisture behavior of stored grain. The pot sits on a heating plate that provides thermal stimulus. Inside the pot, a compact multi-sensor module measures temperature, CO2 concentration, pressure, and relative humidity. The rice is deliberately kept slightly moist so that, when heat and CO2 are introduced, the system reproduces the early-stage conditions that precede a real silo combustion or smoldering incident. The sensor communicates via my OT protocol by Fraunhofer to a gateway built on an NXP S32G3 board. The gateway integrates an Infineon Optiga MTPM external chip that provides hardware-rooted cryptographic keys to secure the telemetry path and harden the overall system. A My OT base station is attached to the gateway to receive the sensor's uplink from inside the glass vessel. Additional ambient sensors measure outdoor temperature, humidity, and pressure to provide a reference baseline for comparison with the conditions inside the simulated silo. The telemetry path mirrors a realistic industrial IoT chain. A My OT sensor node emits low-power, long-range uplink frames, which the IoT gateway receives and forwards over MQTT protocol. A Docker-based backend stack processes the incoming telemetry. Mosquito terminates the MQTT sessions and exposes the message topics. Telegraph subscribes to these topics and transforms the payloads into structured time series points. InfluxDB2 stores the resulting measurements, and Grafana queries the database to render the operational dashboards. The industrial silo dashboard is provisioned as the default home view, ensuring that the system always boots directly into the correct monitoring interface and that all components present a consistent, deterministic startup state aligned with the intended industrial workflow. The Grafana GUI dashboard is divided into 3 rows. The top strip shows MQTT link health and a start control button. It also displays wind and dew point information, a stored power indicator for the sensor's battery, and net power in microwatts. The middle row contains 3 time series panels covering the last 45 minutes, temperature inside the silo versus outdoor temperature, relative humidity, and pressure in hectopascals. These curves make the divergence between normal and incident conditions immediately visible. The bottom row presents CO2 concentration in the headspace, a condensation risk gauge, and an energy chart showing harvested power, load, and net balance in microwatts. These elements tie the environmental behavior to the gateway's energy story. During an incident, the simulated load increases, and the net power and battery indicators reflect the higher communication and processing demand. When the incident starts, the Edge publisher automatically increases the sampling frequency. This higher resolution mode is triggered by the first signs of deviation inside the silo. From this point onward, the GUI shows 2 clearly separated behaviors: the slowly varying outdoor reference curves and the rapidly evolving in-silo measurements. As CO2 is manually injected into the glass vessel, the internal concentration rises sharply. The CO2 curve diverges from the outdoor baseline within seconds, and the system captures the onset of the abnormality in real time. The temperature then begins to climb as the heating plate is activated. This produces a coordinated rise in temperature, humidity, and pressure, all of which are visible as steep slopes in the corresponding graphs. The condensation risk indicator reacts immediately to the combined humidity and temperature shift, moving from a low-risk state into the critical zone. At the same time, the energy subsystem reflects the increased operational demand. Harvest, load, and net power curves show the characteristic fluctuations of a low-power My OT-based monitoring chain operating under stress. Across the sequence of screenshots, the GUI documents the entire progression: initial tranquility, the first signs of divergence, the rapid escalation of internal conditions, and the system's stable, continuous telemetry streaming throughout the event. The result is a complete time-resolved view of how a secured, low-power sensing chain responds when the silo-like environment destabilizes. Condensation hazard estimation today mostly relies on temperature, pressure, and CO2 drift. But early combustion and spoilage also show up in other signals such as oxygen drop, internal temperature gradient shifts, micropressure pulses from biological activity, and fermentation or oxidation traces. Combining these patterns would allow much earlier detection than classical CO2 temperature heuristics, improving warning capability in constrained IoT systems. Thank you for your time.